you can kind of tie it back to the previous example where, I mean, when you're going out, you can set a direction, but the way when you set out and you're heading towards the direction, I mean, things change so much along the way. Like your expectations change, your experiences change the way you want to move. Like, for example, even your interests shift when you're setting out in a direction. So, I mean, just from a personal experience, I never would have believed that I would be going down the trajectory I am at the moment. But I mean, it's only if you put yourself, no, like no one. I
No
think
one
we
does.
talked about this earlier when we started recording the first few episodes. I mean, no, and you talk to anyone who is quote unquote successful. If you do get time to speak with someone that you admire, or that someone like, for example, one of the directors at work, I mean, their life is just like, they started off as technicians working, fixing phone systems. And then it just kind of goes from there. Like, they never intended to grow a business or have 50 staff working for them or anything like that. It kind of just progressed. And, you know, when their experience built, they just kind of kept shifting towards this unknown you're talking about.
That's the journey.
So it's extremely... And even looking back on anything I've done, there's no way I've looked back and said, oh yeah, that's exactly where I wanted to go. That makes sense.
No one does. That's the big myth. It's just so hard to contemplate that, because the whole culture programs you to think the opposite.
Yeah, we want to like box everything. We want to say
box
like
everything. Year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. It's the Alan Watts as well. You're given this progression and then it just stops. So you try and build the rest of it, because it's the way you've been wired from a young age. It just doesn't work like that. Like, I'd be so miserable. Like, what would I have missed out on if I just followed but even if I followed the psychology pathway, I'm sure it would have evolved to something else.
Absolutely.
You know, I
You
probably
would be
have
doing
still
other
ended
things.
up writing because, wow, I'm learning so much here, and I like writing. And then, oh, wow, I really like this writing thing. Like, you just can't not discover new things along the way. Think about, if people struggle with this to wrap their heads around it, think about who you were when you were 5 years old and what you wanted to do. And we kind of like, you know, kids, you can't really take them seriously. They come up with all this stuff they want to do. It's just fire, man. And it's all very ideal. And it changes all the time. Yeah, that's great. That's the healthier default. It changed. That pattern actually continues. Luke, you know, Gilly, you know, at the age of 62, steps down from being partner at a law firm. And then he's like, wow, I learned that there's actually more to life than being partner at a law firm. I learned my calling is not being a lawyer, it's being a teacher. At the age of 62, very accomplished, you know, got as high as you could in law. And then age 69, he's like, oh, I'm not even a teacher. I found another calling. You know, I'm starting to help mentor all these young people beyond teaching, which is, I think, when he met, say, Nick Abraham and myself, you know, back in the early From the Ground Up days. And obviously there's other people he's really helped in similar kind of situations, young. So it's complete, you know, like complete nonsense. But I think the idea is like, everyone's like, oh, okay, so it's like completely just whatever, going with the flow. I mean, not quite. You know, Columbus was still looking to do something. That's why I like that example. He was trying to get to Asia. I think you need to be going on a journey and like just taking the next best step you can. To use the $1,000 analogy, what's the best door you can go through next? But you got to go through that with very open eyes. Very open eyes. I think when we started the Constant Student, I said this to Liam, who wanted clarity around, well, how's this going to go? What will the arrangement be from the team and equity and stuff like that? I go, the problem with what we're doing, because I understand things like the $1,000 now, and I'm thinking about that when I plan things now, it's like, this could evolve into anything. This is going to change so much. Because you haven't been on a kind of business journey like this before, I think of it as much bigger than a business. I think of it as a movement. Not really a business, but the movements really, they change and evolve over time. You don't really see that. But if you look at like any kind of maybe startup or a real dynamic business, like they evolve and change. Like their first pitch deck, if you get to see maybe like Canva or Airbnb or one of those companies, you can see their pitch decks, which is the presentations they normally make for raising money. I think that's a good example because it's kind of like an archaeology. You can see what they were planning for the business or what the emphasis was at a point in time, and then you can see how it's changed. Because a lot of them have them online because they're famous examples from prominent companies. That's just an example of reality that applies to anything, from the plan you have for your life to what you're really interested in to how your projects evolve over time. You can't foresee where they're going to go. So, Constant Student could go in so many different directions. It could focus on hiring. It could focus on, and it has changed so much. It has changed. Like, it was pretty generic at the start. Now thinking of concentrating on the niche of writing and using, creating programs that are much like what we set up for the authors of 18 and Lost. And, it's given us the idea to start a marketing edge. Like anything, when you're really open, but you still got to take steps, right? You got to take the next best step. You can't just do nothing and expect it to find you. America is never going to find Christopher Columbus sitting in Spain. Christopher Columbus has to set sail to discover something new. And you just have to be open to that. You can't be locked in on the goal.